the recording. Okay. So I will try to read it as clearly as possible, and maybe in a way also as quickly as possible. I wrote it a long time ago, but he was invited by Bernard Tschumi to lecture at Columbia University in New York. And at that time I was doing this, I was writing essays about the architects who impressed me the most, and he was one of them. So I begin. Apropos of Jean Nouvel's lecture. In 1987, he received the Grand Prix d'Architecture, 1987, then the Équerre d'Argent for the Institute of du Monde Arabe building, and then the Year Designer. So Patrice Gouret wrote in A+U, a great Japanese magazine, in 1988, at 42, Jean Nouvel has put French architecture back on its feet. At the same age, Le Corbusier was just beginning the drawings at his masterpiece Villa Savoie. Yes, it is true, but this was possible at a time when it was thought, as Nouvel himself put it, that architecture's future is not architectural. Because yes, that's what Jean Nouvel declared, architecture's future is not architectural. And at the time when the following question was addressed in Newsline, February 1990, this Newsline was the magazine published by Columbia University. Does this residential building, Nemesis, and you are going to see it in the PowerPoint presentation, function as a critique of romantic notions like authenticity? A critique of romantic notions like authenticity. Is authenticity a romantic notion? Is truth just a dream, a fiction? In the absence of truth, we perish, said Le Corbusier. In the absence of illusionists, without illusions, we perish, seems to say Jean Nouvel. God, again, this is, I'm really sorry. I edited it, I corrected it. It shouldn't be with a, I'm exasperated at myself. I edited, and now I see I am reading to you the version that is not edited. So please forgive me. I will just stop reading because I am irritated by myself. I don't understand where it is. The correct version. I corrected it, and now I cannot find it. I am mad at myself. But this happens when you want so much to be perfect, and then it is even said that the very good is the enemy of the good. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't know where it is. I try one more time, forgive me. If I don't succeed to find it, I will just make the PowerPoint presentation and give up on... Why is this happening now? Why on his birthday? I know I renamed it, and the problem is I keep renaming and changing the titles in quest for perfection, that at times I forget the last change. It should be Jean Nouvel's lecture. I cannot find it. I can email it to you anyway. Yeah. I don't believe this. I feel like stopping, really. I feel like, please forgive me. I work a lot, but this is unbelievable what is happening. Where did I put it? I corrected it, and now I cannot find it. Please help me. What should I do? Hello?
Yeah, Dan, what type of file is it? Is it a Word file?
It's unbelievable, actually.
Relax. What type of file is it? Is it a Word file?
The PDF.
Yeah. So just go to Adobe and say open, and you should have a list of recent files there that you can choose from.
I just told you that they are all PDFs, and I forgot how I named it. I think it's
yeah, but you have it in the order that you. If you say open, it'll give you a list of files, and it'll be in the order that
Please forgive me. In fact, I'm unforgivable. I don't understand why is this happening now. Jean Nouvel's Nouvel and Ports Parambi. It's also true. I have a huge amount of things, but maybe it's Nouvel's lecture. Let me try Nouvel's lecture, but thank you, Bruce, for wanting to help. No items. Yes, because I typed with an extra L. Now, this is the last thing you need now to see me pathetically, you know, searching here for something that Jean Nouvel's lecture, Jean Nouvel's lecture. I only have these two. I don't understand what is happening, really. I edited it today, and now, yeah, I found it. Sorry, I found it. So forgive me. I will start again. Please forgive me. I will begin from where I left it. So, in an interview published in L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui in June 1990, in relation with La Tour Sans Fin by Jean Nouvel, we read, L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui, le Tour Sans Fin functions in two directions, towards the center of the earth and towards the sky, a simultaneous plunging into the infinity of matter and non-matter. Jean Nouvel, exactly, and in either case, it's an illusionist's game. L'architettura è cosa mentale. L'architettura è cosa mentale, an illusionist's game. These words seem to express Jean Nouvel's convictions. Yet, is architecture just a cosa mentale? And is the architect's work just an illusionist's game? Of course, Jean Nouvel paraphrased Michelangelo, who said, pittura è una cosa mentale. But Michelangelo still had intuition crayonnante, this meaning intuition relating to, you know, the crayons, the pencils, actions on paper. I don't know very well how to translate. While Jean Nouvel refuses it, let us remember his words published in L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui, February 1984. Mon obsession est de faire reculer le plus loin possible l'inexpliqué et le non maîtrisé dans mon travail, de refuser l'intuition crayonnante, de nier le reflet d'une sorte du divin ou d'ailleurs qui serait suppose féconder l'œuvre. So he says that he's trying to reject, to banish the inexplainable and the you know, what is not mastered in his work, and to refuse the reflection of anything divine or other which could be nourishing the work. Indeed, l'intuition crayonnante is missing in his work. And this might be one of the reasons why his Tour Sans Fin, the Tower Without End, is a project for a skyscraper that he did in Paris at the time, is not really a skyscraper, but an earth scraper. This is how I see his Tower Sans Fin. It is not really a ring of conjunction between the earth and the sky, as the endless column by Brancusi, mentioned as a reference by Jean Nouvel, is. The endless column is not a simultaneous plunging into the infinity of matter and non-matter, but it grows with measured pathos towards the sky, from the earth to the sky. It is very significant that its first module, the base, is different than the last one, which remains open. The endless column doesn't have a base, while La Tour Sans Fin doesn't. The endless column does have a base, while La Tour Sans Fin doesn't. The endless column is endless at its top, while La Tour Sans Fin seems to be more sans fin, meaning endless, at its base. How else could I interpret its projected crater around its base, which gives the impression that the tower is actually falling into the earth instead of growing from it upwards. This is why I think it is more an earthscape than a skyscraper, an earthscraper than a skyscraper. The very presence of the crater seems to me to be very significant because it shows Nouvel's apprehensions vis-à-vis life and art, his cosmogony. It is true that he wanted the tower to grow towards the sky, to dematerialize at its top, but by plunging it also into the infinity of matter, that is the earth, he subverted this growth and almost reversed it. The presence of the crater proves it. It is true that the deeper you go into the earth, the higher you go into the sky. It is also true that, to use the language of the alchemist, rubedo, meaning reddening, cannot be without nigredo, darkening or blackening. But nigredo is not simultaneous with rubedo. Plunging into the infinity of matter is the first step in the creative process, and it is not at all simultaneous with the last one, the plunging into the infinity of non-matter. In fact, growing towards the sky is not a so-called plunging. Sitting on the earth, you cannot so-called plunge into the sky, unless, of course, you do not sit on the earth, but in some kind of illusory sky, the conceptual sky of modernity, the non-earthly level of our present-day ambitions. It is from this non-earthly conceptual sky that Jean Nouvel plunges into the infinity of matter and non-matter alike. And this is why for him, l'architettura è una cosa mentale. And this is why, in his own words, this tower will never be anything more than a ghost, unlike the endless column, which is not a ghost, which is both other and itself simultaneously. And this is because Brancusi's art is not an illusionist game, and it is not just a cosa mentale. Neither for Brancusi nor for Michelangelo, l'intuition crayonnante was absent. And for neither of them, the divine, or the d'ailleurs, the otherness, were pushed aside le plus loin possible, as far as possible. But it is true, neither Michelangelo nor Brancusi lived in our times, a time eminently without illusions, and at the most with just illusionisms, an illusionist game without illusions. This is one of the paradoxes of today's life. And this is why our skyscraper becomes an earthscraper surrounded at its base by a large dark crater. Of course, all these thoughts were provoked by the project Tour Sans Fin, whose construction at this time, when I wrote it in 1992, didn't start yet. But they are quite correlative with other words and images by Jean Nouvel. I have to recognize it. I was seduced by his vers des architectures, his anti-manifeste parodique en faveur d'une architecture plurielle. Manifeste parodique, which is a parody in favor of a plural architecture, even if I do not quite understand the use of the word parodique. I was seduced by his frequent use of the words amour and aimer, love and to love. I was seduced by his search for architectures which are vivant, tolerant, intelligent, and different. Very nice. Live architecture that are alive, tolerant, intelligent, and different. I was seduced by his homage to imagination, and symmetrically by his homage to intention realistic intentions. I was seduced by his love for des purs et des impurs, des vertueux et des putains, des spontanés et des sophistiqués, des nus et des sapés, des prolos et des bourgeoises, pour qu'elles soient vivantes. So he loves everybody and everything, although he can express himself quite critically often. I was seduced by his horror of systems, comme des robots faits de mêmes pièces interchangeables, bien programmés pour répondre à des questions limitées. I'm sorry about these quotations in French. I had no time to translate them. But I think you understand, in essence, he is against systems, against anything that is dogmatic and doesn't accept the great variety of the world and of life. I was seduced by his preference for architectures which are fragiles et mortelles, nécessitant amour, soin et attention, avec, comme tout le monde, un destin incertain lié au coup du sort et à la communauté à laquelle il appartient. So he promotes and he has affection for an architecture that is fragile and mortal, which needs love and care and attentions. Yet his criticism of those architectures which impose their mode of life and which perpetually demonstrate ostensibly their power is in contradiction with his own practice. How else could I understand the imposition stipulated by contract on the poor inhabitants of Nemours one not to touch in any way the art scrollings, which were done by artists, it's true, inscribed on the walls of their own apartments. Not to speak about the impositions implied by those hospital-like rooms, cold and almost sinister, of his Hotel Saint-Jean, and you are going to see that hotel, or the impositions obviously present in the perverse functionality of those technological muharabih, I don't know if I pronounce well, is in Arabic, of the Institut du Monde Arabe, but you are going to see that work and what I'm referring to. Architecture future is not architectural, he said, and this is really something we should remember. Architecture's future is not architectural. But then painting's future might not be pictorial, sculpture's future might not be sculptural, and perhaps life's future might not be living. We might all be just breathing in that sorte d'euphorie constante Marcel Duchamp spoke about and paraphrasing Rose c'est la vie. Rose c'est la vie was a name created for himself by Marcel Duchamp. We might say un architecte ne doit pas obligatoirement faire des bâtiments. Il peut faire d'autres choses. Il peut respirer. An architect might not have to build buildings. He might just do something else, meaning he could just breathe. Of course, Nouvel didn't infer something so extreme in his words. He simply stated that architecture might not be architectural. But if not architectural, what else? In 1918, Nouvel wrote, from now on, architecture has to be meaningful. It must refer rather to the mind than to the eye. Yet the curious thing is that the more concerned with the mind he is, the more scenographic he is, or his work. While a highly architectural, so-called architectural architecture, like let's say the pagoda Horyuji Buddhist temple in Japan, is not at all scenographic. And at the same time, we cannot deny its so-called mindness. It is true that architecture must be meaningful, and I'm very glad that someone else thinks so too, especially at a time when we are assaulted by the strange belief that meaning should be removed or banished. But the question is, how could we make our architecture meaningful when our life today is almost meaningless? And this is why most of the time our architecture, even if highly concerned with the mind, is so shallow, so unconvincingly scenographic. And it might be exactly the opposite, that when architecture is intensely architectural, it is also intensely meaningful. Only architecture, perhaps, I add now the word perhaps, can save architecture, in as much as only life can save life. No, Miss Rose c'est la vie, alias M. Duchamp. No, a painter should paint his painting and the architect should build his building, not just for the eye and not just for the mind, but for both at the same time. It is true that the hungry Western eye devoured everything, and now we ran out of mystery. But the sun is still on the sky, the trees are still flourishing in the spring, and I don't know why I make this reference to the worm. I talked about it in Eisenman's case. Anyway, that's what I wrote then. And the worm crushed by a car still moves miraculously its tail. Paradoxically, we seem to be searching now for a scene unseen. We use so often the word mind, but we so rarely use the word heart. Why? Could there be a greater mystery than this, the heart or the soul? I know that there are equal dangers in overemphasizing the heart, like in the case of so many languid melodramas. But at times as heartless as ours, perhaps we should have the courage to remember this word and its meaning. Now, when I say a time as ours, I was referring to the 1990s. But maybe the situation is not very different now. I don't know. Anyway, to return to Jean Nouvel, for the New Theatre of Japan, 1986, he proposed a monolith of black polished granite containing three objects: a big shiny stone that reflects like a mirror the sky, the city, and the people. Well, the stone, the so-called stone, was quite huge in order to contain those three so-called objects, which were nothing else, in fact, by three large theaters. How could Nouvel name a theater an object and still talk about architectures that are fragile, and mortal? When are we going to use this word less frequently? I'm talking about object, describing a building. When? A beautiful flat is a large flat, said Jean Nouvel. This is a statement which borders on cynicism. I could give many examples of beautiful small flats and horrible large ones. Is it really the dimension that counts or the inner quality? But statements like this one are simply for provocation. Yet I wonder if they help in any way the search for meaning. Le propre du génie est de fournir des idées aux crétins une vingtaine d'années plus tard. You know, it's in the power of the genius to provide ideas to the stupid ones 20 years in advance. That's what he wrote. Well, quoting a so-called great writer. So, you know, I ask myself, are the crétins willing to listen? Vers une architecture, vers des architectures, vers sans architecture. Because Le Corbusier wrote vers une architecture, then here comes Jean Nouvel writing vers des architectures, the plural, but then almost like a following, a logical following based on what he said would arrive this perplexing vers sans architecture, meaning towards without architecture, because you saw he himself said that the future of architecture will not be architectural. Yet I cannot end here with the implication that vers sans architecture might follow vers des architectures. I am still haunted by Jean Nouvel's rejection of the divine and the elsewhere, by his ostentatious desire to push them aside as far away as possible. What is strange is that the more he wants to do so, the more somehow the elsewhere becomes manifest. There are many puzzling things in Jean Nouvel's work. For example, he is one of the very few architects who use sometimes pitched roofs without falling in disagreeable nostalgia. If anything, his work is the antithesis of nostalgia. How do we explain this, that the most banal pitched roof is, in his case, entirely removed from the bucolic field of references? And how do we explain that this high-tech architect is so much a contextualist? This man, though apparently obsessed by electronic gadgets, still finds room to consider climatic conditions, a thing which even the most pastoral architects ignore today. At a time violently adverse to genius loci, Jean Nouvel goes in the opposite direction. But he does so in paradoxical ways, because while he seems to reject the eye, his architecture forces expressions like visually stunning work. And while innocence seems to be the last thing present in his work, he asserts, quoting Borges, that he always made architecture avec le sérieux d'un enfant qui s'amuse, with the seriousness of a child who amuses himself. This is a beautiful phrase, and I don't think it's just from Borges, I think it's also from Nietzsche. But yes, this is what we should all aspire towards, to work with the seriousness of a child who amuses himself. How are we to explain all these incongruities or contradictions? Another meaningful puzzling gesture is the selection of the words to be placed between quotation marks in his own discourse. Some of these words are natural, divine, elsewhere, oeuvre. Try to imagine these words between quotation marks. The result is a questioning of their reality or validity. The natural becomes unnatural, the divine becomes profane, the elsewhere becomes here, and the author of the oeuvre becomes less identifiable. But by placing the word oeuvre between quotation marks, doesn't he somehow infer exactly the inexplainable and not master, l'inexpliqué et le non maîtrisé? He wanted to push aside as far away as possible. Doesn't he infer that the author of the oeuvre is not really the nameable one? And indeed, who is the so-called author of the work done by the child, so seriously absorbed in his amusement? The paradox is that the more he rejects the elsewhere, the more he arrives at it. And his high-tech architecture is not really very high-tech. I think of Ivan Karamazov, the atheist par excellence, yet with something divine about him. Divine with a minor sign, divine between quotation marks. Couldn't we call his Tour sans fin the Ivan Karamazov Tower? Why did Jean Nouvel, in his presentation to the jury of his ghostly tower, mention the cemetery nearby the site of the building? And why does the poem which accompanies the essay on this tower, published in L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui, end with these words, L'Empire des Morts, the empire of the dead? Le vent redouble ses efforts et fait si bien qu'il déracine celui de qui la tête au ciel était voisine et dont les pieds touchaient à l'empire des morts. So the last words of the presentation of this tower was the empire of the dead. So is death not the elsewhere par excellence? And is it not the tower by its very essence, its opposite? Then why is it to be, in Jean Nouvel's conception, nothing else but a ghost? Why? And here I end. I end with this question because this gentleman, Jean Nouvel, I think he knows something about the two sides of life. And it's not an accident that he mentioned death when he was supposed to present his tower. And it's not an accident that this tower, and unfortunately I don't have a picture of it now, but maybe if you are interested, you can find it on the web, is plunging into the earth, into the darkness of the earth. And there is a crater around it. That's why I called it an earth scraper and not a skyscraper. And now allow me please to start the PowerPoint presentation. I hope you see you do see the first page. So there are 400 pictures, please bear with me. This is a comprehensive overview of his work, starting with his earliest works and arriving at the latest. Please move this window away from the shared application. I don't know what's going on here. I think I know, sorry, I have to stop the share and I have to, he's giving me trouble, Zoom now. Okay, I think now it is fine. So you probably see the image with Jean Nouvel. If you don't, please let me know, but I think you do see it. Right? What's going on? What's it? I don't understand. Today is not my lucky day. Sometimes the gods are malicious. When you try to do something as well as possible, something is happening. Do you see the page with the window, the page with Jean Nouvel?
Just the hand of Jean Nouvel.
Well, the hand, yes, but what is bizarre is I cannot move it forward. It's unbelievable what is happening today. I just don't comprehend. I never had this trouble for 2 months, and now I do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. So I go to share screen. I click on the screen. Something is wrong. I don't understand. Forgive me. I become hysterical now because I panic. I don't understand what is happening. This only happened on the 31st of May. That is, you know, almost 3 months ago, 2 months and a half ago. It never happened since then. I'll try something else. I don't believe this. Let me close the window, maybe. Okay, and I reopen it. I don't know, it's very bizarre what is happening. Please forgive me. Now it's telling me I cannot minimize. I cannot do anything today. Nothing works. Nothing. Unbelievable. Afterwards, Nouvel is this one. Sorry, 1 minute. I try one more time and should work. I don't understand what is happening. Yeah, it should work now. Sorry. Okay, I hope it works. Yes, finally I got rid of that picture. So a few pictures with the architect, with the master. Happy birthday, Mr. Nouvel. He is probably a good negotiator, otherwise he wouldn't get so many commissions. Although I heard him in the conference I attended, he said, I am the architect who lost the most competitions in the world ever. I don't know if it's true. I don't think so. There are others who lost a lot, but he probably also lost a lot. Anyway, he found a way around the problem. Yes, he's seductive. We'll see more pictures with him. We start with one of his earliest works in Paris, l'Institut du Monde Arabe. Good work, not far away from La Cathédrale de Notre Dame. You have to know that Jean Nouvel loves technology, loves technological gadgets, and most of his works are impossible to conceive in the absence of technology. This was one of them, and is one of them. It's a very metallic work, metaphorically and physically, but it's a good work. It's a very good work, and from the roof you can see Paris properly. This is, I was referring in that writing to this detail, which is inspired from the tradition of the Arab world, but he recreated it through technology. So these openings are controlled automatically to filter light into the Institute of the Arab world. Unfortunately, from what I read, very often the mechanism, the high automation doesn't function. So the Arab world spends a lot of money to make these things, these gadgets, these technological gadgets function. But they are interesting, and you see, it's a dialogue, a little bit artificial, a little bit forced between today's time, which is highly technological, and the past. In this case, the Arab past. So you can see it's like you know, in a camera, you know, it's and this is supposed to function automatically, and it was a very expensive thing, and it doesn't function properly. But visually, aesthetically, it is interesting, and the attempt is there, and perhaps a correct one, to connect with the ornaments of the Arab world from the past, but in a contemporary language. A big problem here in this building is I think the first floor has the ceiling very low, and so when you enter is, I don't know, maybe I have a conventional state of mind, but the entrance is almost a little bit sadistic. But these details are interesting, and as a whole, the building is very coherent and convincing aesthetically. And yes, it does belong to our time, but it doesn't neglect the cultural context which tries to serve. So he was here both creative and inventive. Now, the apartment building, this is a project was not realized, and I'm not very sure why I incorporated it, just to show you another side of him. This was not built, and it's very ludic and very chromatic and almost pop, perhaps a little too pop. But even here you see some, the vicinity of a certain technology, because it has, in this frenetical coloring, almost fluorescent, some kind of reference to the present, or to the approximate present. But it was not built. Now this is the building that I mentioned in that writing that I read. And I think it's an excellent building, done with parts that were purchased from almost from the specialized stores, meaning prefabricated parts, industrial parts. It's like a ship. This is the building that Newsline at Columbia asked, if this is a building that goes against or questions so-called romantic notions like authenticity. To me, this building is authentical for our time, and is actually more authentical than the little buildings on the left. This is my opinion. And there are actually two buildings, and I like them. They are, inexpensive blocks of flats, maybe even social housing, but done in a very creative way. And I think this project is a success. The only thing I don't understand, and I mentioned it, is because he did advocate the fragility of architecture and the freedom, of the occupants, and here the occupants who rented or even some bought the apartments, they had to sign in the contract that they will in no way erase or modify the scribblings on the walls that some friends of Jean Nouvel did, and you are going to see them. But I don't know, I mean, maybe some kind of a balance between freedom and necessity, or freedom or order and disorder is necessary. But I think both buildings are good. And so I don't know why Newsline thought that they might not be so-called authentical. He was young when he built. By the way, maybe you know, Jean Nouvel didn't want to study architecture. He wanted to become a painter, but he was not accepted at the École des Beaux-Arts, at the School of Fine Arts. So then he settled for architecture, and I don't think he regrets now. Now these are, views from the interior, and you see the scribblings on the doodles in a way on the walls. Well, these were done by the friends of Jean Nouvel, some artists, and they are untouchables. You had to sign a contract that you'll never modify them. So I thought it was a little bit, controlling, I mean, if these people live there, give them the freedom to, don't force upon them a form of aesthetics that might not be theirs. But anyway, this is what he did. He said also that apartments make better places to work than offices. And he also said, bring the office into the apartment and the apartment into the office. And I think he's right, because an office that is warmed up by the, you know, the feeling, the intimacy of a home becomes more conducive to a, you know, a more humane kind of work. And at the same time, you know, if you bring the work at home, you have a chance to, instead of laying on the sofa and doing nothing, you have the chance to combine what he actually wants by uniting the office with the home is he attempts to unite work with play or the relaxation. And this connects with what he said, that he always worked with a seriousness of a child who loses himself in his playing or in his amusement. And I do believe this is a very important issue, to attempt to unite work with play, or the working days with the weekends. So the separation between the two is not good, because for 5 days you work without pleasure, and then in 2 days you so-called have pleasure, or you amuse yourself, but you don't create anything, you don't produce anything. So you kind of lose. So in both periods of time, in my opinion, you lose. Only by uniting work with play and the working time with a weekend time, you can attain that seriousness of the child who amuses himself, which is actually the basis for creativity. I think exactly like him. Now, Saint-Jean Hotel, it's a hotel where, when I wrote that article or essay, I saw pictures published in a magazine, and the rooms were very clinical. They looked like a dentist's office, or you know, I mean, they were horrid, they were sadistic. But I looked now, because I incorporated this building now in the presentation, and I think the owner changed. It was very hard for me to find pictures like I saw them 30 years ago. I did find something, but not quite as stringently clinical as Nouvel designed them. He has, in the elevations, he has these masks, these embroidered skins that he covers his buildings, and I think this is a very good thing in his architecture, because he brings fragility and sensitivity to otherwise prismatic architectures, which could be very rigid and cold. So this architectural curtain that covers his buildings, and this is not the only example, but it was anticipated, this trait, this characteristic of his work in his early works, like this one. Also, in this strange, not perhaps strange, in this hotel he built, he experimented. A few bathrooms had complete glass walls. This is almost complete, and you know, a bathroom is supposed to be an intimate place, you know. But he said, you know, I wanted to encourage conversation. Well, you know. It depends, you know, someone might not feel very inclined for conversation when he's doing, I don't know, certain things in the bathroom or in the toilet. But he was also, so he contradicts sometimes himself. He also said complete transparency is obscene. And I agree with him. That's why I personally am against the very large surfaces of glass, which do not attempt to problematize seeing, and quite the opposite. So I agree with him. Total transparency could be, or is even obscene. Well, you know, again, the clinical aspect that I mentioned of the rooms is perhaps not so well seen in this picture. Maybe a little more here. The rooms are cold for my taste, but outside the building is rusted. You know, maybe he used some kind of curtain, I don't know. Anyway, So this is the outside and this is the inside. And this is the master. Now the Paris Philharmonia, which is a new building, and he had troubles with the city of Paris because it was very, very expensive, and there were lawsuits and so on. Anyway, I saw this building. I was there, and I have to tell you, it is a cold building, but this ornamentation that he brings to the skin of the building is brilliant. Although it remains cold, the building, I think you see this geometrical animal becomes one that is almost organic because of the skin, you know, so he understood this is maybe his major quality, that he has a tendency towards using, very strong, so to speak, geometries and prismatic conditions. Well, here there are some deformations, but then he brings in this impressionistic side of him, because this is almost a pointillist painting. He fragments, he pixelates the facade, and in this way he connects with that fragility that he mentioned, with a vulnerability that he probably also sees it in himself as well. And I think this is a great thing in architecture, where the architect is not arrogantly claiming infinite power, but understands fragility and vulnerability. And not that he is not capable of some kind of arrogance, and you will see a tower in Barcelona or a police station I think in Belgium, but all in all, he is a complex man, and I think he was sincere when he expressed his affection for vulnerability and fragility. It's a unique building, and I mean, at least at the level of aesthetics, this is a building that has personality, and it has to be saluted positively, I think, because of it. The interior is the interior, At night, this, I called it animal. I don't know why I never used this word vis-a-vis a building, but this time I did about this building. It's almost some kind of an architectural Moby Dick, referring to Melville's novel. Anyway. It is my belief that good building looks good and is interesting almost at every levels of its inception and its becoming, because something of the integrity of the design is seen at any stage, I think, at every step. Anyway, and I admire these workers. You see, you had the conception of the architect, but then you have although he said that he was against l'intuition crayonnante, in a way, the implication was that he was against the touch of the hand, but by using such ornaments, inevitably he came back to the hand, to the working hand. And these people, they combine these various organic modules, in a manual way. And perhaps, well, maybe the robots could do it too, but the module, if there is just one, maybe there are several, is very interesting. It's almost like a bird in flight, and it's interesting. He escapes rationalism through this treatment of the facade. Here he is trying to sell his work. Yes, for an architect, it's very important to know how to defend his work or her work. Here he is with, of course, Zaha Hadid. They were friends. And back to the Philharmonia of Paris. and it's, I would say, brilliant ornamentation. When I see such images, I become emotional because I understand the impact and the power of architecture. Those who think, like Peter Zumthor, for example, surprisingly, that architecture cannot change the world, and that he claimed that he gave up on that thought a long time ago, I don't think it's true. And plus, if it is true, and if it was true, why continue to build? I think any building should attempt to, not in an arrogant way, but to contribute to a betterment of life and the betterment of you know, the environment, the people's lives. And if you don't have that belief, why do you continue to build? I imagine that Nouvel thought that his building would have an impact. You see, it's not even finished here, and people stay in line. And so there is an event. There is something moving here that, you know, the building is capable of provoking people, and people respond. Okay. Well, Mr. Nouvel, it seems the building, yes, was born from your imagination, from your mind, but now belongs to the city of Paris and to its people. Inside, interiors, sometimes his interiors are less interesting than what is outside. For my taste, they are a little bit too clean and too whitish, even if it's some kind of a beige. The interior sometimes seem to be a little bit, you saw also in that Saint-Jean hotel, you know, outside was a rusted skin, you know, and inside was that clinical, cold look. And maybe this psychoanalyst could have some subject matter for some speculations. Anyway, about Mr. Jean Nouvel. But as I said other times, there seems to be a connection, sometimes at least, sometimes a connection between one's name and one's destiny and one's work. His name is Nouvel, and his work is Nouvel too. It refers to novelty, to newness, and he's in a continuous quest for newness. He's a little bit narcissistic, of course, and he's not the only one. I am too, and I think architects in general are narcissistic. Louvre, Abu Dhabi, you know this work. It's a good work with one exception, I would say, if you allow me to say something. Personally, I think that centralized, perfectly squared, perfectly circled that perfect dome is too much in contradiction with what is underneath it. Underneath it, we see exactly those fragilities that he admired and had affection for. You know, here almost in a bazaar-like. But then he comes with this cap, this you know, authoritarian cap that I think is problematic. What is beautiful is that he filters light through this otherwise centralized, you know, perfect cap in a very poetical way. But I think, personally, I think it's a mistake to cover a bazaar with something. It's almost like, you know, the emperor crushing, you know, those he just conquered, and something is wrong here. It surprises me because inside I see this labyrinthical way of filtering light, which welcomes disorder and unplanned for, or appears to be unplanned for, you know, filterings of light. And you are like in a forest, but no forest, I'm sorry, Mr. Nouvel looks like this, a perfect circle. So it's a contradiction here. And I'm surprised he doesn't seem to be aware of it. Or maybe he intends it like this, I don't know. But with all my admiration for him, here I leave him. I don't understand this abuse of power in a way. And you know, with this I like very much is fragility here, is you know, is impressionistic, is pointillism, architectural pointillism. I think the sun itself likes it. But the sun should be a perfect, even the sun is not a perfect sphere, I guess, I don't know. But that thing, that cap, that cupola that so abusively is placed on top of this and is so perfect, I personally think is a problem. But maybe it's a problem existent in French culture because they also manicure their trees. You know, you see trees that become cubes. I think it's a problem here. I feel like changing that myself. If Jean Nouvel was here with me in my room, I would have fought for him. I said, please, Jean, change this. It's not the Arab world, and it's maybe not even you. Anyway, sorry about this pathetical plea for something else. But it's so domineering, you know, and anyway. Yes, it's beautiful what is within the embroidery. But why does it have to be perfectly, you know, designed and circled cupola? Why? Why no more? Why not more freedom? Like what is underneath the bazaar? Anyway, this is my opinion. But the client seems happy. The architect seems happy. The workers, I don't know how happy they were because they really struggled, but I admire them. I truly admire these workers who try to bring to fruition the intuition and the will of an architect. And you can tell it's a labyrinth. It's a mess. And they did it. Look at this, you know. And it's huge, of course, when you see the human silhouette. Personally, anyway, will arrive. The last work will be, I think, an improvement on what he did here. But the way he thought of bringing light in is brilliant, and I totally agree with it. I just don't agree with that cupola. I also don't agree very much with this tower in Barcelona, but we'll arrive at it. Because here, just like in Abu Dhabi, he becomes a little bit not himself. That is, he forgets that tender side of him that sympathizes with the unplanned, with the fragile, with the vulnerable. Anyway, Tour Icon Lyon, I presented this presentation a few weeks ago, but this work I introduced now in the PowerPoint presentation with a few other works. So this is a new addition to the presentation, and this is, I showed before the project, but now you see the building being built. Even here, I think he does correctly. He uses more or less a prism, but then he begins to problematize it and fragment it, not just geometrically, but also through color. And this impressionistic side of him, if I can call it so, I think it's a positive thing. And you'll see the building being built. It's called Icon. It's in the area La Confluence in Lyon. There are interesting buildings there, including Le Musée de Confluence by Kop Himmelblau, and also the Orange Cube by Jacob and McFarlane, and that one we'll see. I think this is a great quality he has. You see, he uses a rectangle, but within this rectangle, there are approximations and deviations, almost like, deviations not in terms of from rectangularity, but I see here a friction between certitude and incertitude, or doubts even. And this makes me think also of some paintings by Piet Mondrian. So I think when Nouvel is at his best, when he creates a balance between certitude and incertitude. So you see the building, you know, it's a little bit unsettling. And I think this is a quality it has, that it is a little bit unsettling because it seems to disintegrate somehow, you know, and it's exactly because of that affection he had and has for the periphery, for fragility, for vulnerability, for decentering. Unfortunately, at times the center is too obvious in his work, but only sometimes. Also, you see at the top, the building seems to appear to fragment itself, to dismember itself. So this is in a way his maybe his pessimistic side, that side that made the skyscraper become an earth scraper, but expressed differently. He also built in New York City, in Manhattan, an apartment building, which you are going to see, where he also plays with the facade in kind of a similar way. And I think he's successful. So you see, the building is not monolithical. I mean, it is, but at the same time, is anti-monolithic, crystallization. And here you see the great, I call it the great orange cube by Brendan and McFarlane, Jacob and McFarlane. I had the occasion to interview on Skype Brendan McFarlane for 1.5 hours. They were the authors of the building on the right, in the proximity of the building by Jean Nouvel. Interesting, vicinity here. And I think both did a good architecture, and I don't know exactly what is here, but all three of them kind of participate to an intriguing, at least intriguing ensemble. One Central Park, Sydney, another big apartment building where he also experimented with a vertical forest. There are curious things here too, as there are in some other. You see, he has I think it's a psychological problem, because here, just like in Abu Dhabi and in Lyon, he has this, you see, this showy, extravagant platforms that, you wonder, what are they for? Well, the only raison d'etre is to reflect light, sunlight, on some plants which are, at a lower level. And I understand the need to bring light to those plants, but perhaps a less showy and, extravagant and expensive way could have been found. I almost wish I was a psychoanalyst, maybe Freudian. I feel there is a material here for an inquiry, because I see a theme in his works. Again, think about the immense effort, constructive, financial, and so on, to bring light into a courtyard here where some plants had been condemned to have no light, but by whom? By him, through design. So he tries to compensate through an immense effort, I think, an initial deficiency. If he truly cared about those plants, he probably could have found a less eccentric way to bring light to them. Also, personally, I have some doubts about these rugs of vegetation hanging on the facades of the building. I personally think nature deserves more generosity from us. To impose on nature to be suspended on our towers in this way, I don't think is very modest. Sorry, Mr. Nouvel. We celebrate you today, but allow me also at times to express my criticism. I do it with affection towards you, but I feel I have to do it. You don't hear me, but I think certain things deserve not necessarily applauses. Anyway, even here you see nature is aestheticized, I mean, these rugs of vegetation, there was an artist or a specialist who does this, who collaborated with him. I still see the same abuse, the same, arrogant display of power on the side of man vis-a-vis nature. And I truly think we need to be a little more humble vis-a-vis nature. So Patrick Blanc helped him. He creates the world's tallest vertical garden for Jean Nouvel Sydney Tower. Now, I wouldn't really call it a vertical garden. I am sorry. Other projects have been built like this in Milan. I think it's still a perversion. So we kill nature, we cut down trees, we cut down forests, we level mountains, and then we climb our buildings with the very nature that we killed or tortured. And we continue to torture it. And that is because we are not modest enough. You know, why do we cut the forest in the first place? Just because we need madly to build other super towers? You know, I still think this is anthropocentrism, not at its best. But this is our time. What can we do? And here we do these kind of things. I mean, can you imagine how the cost of all those platforms that are suspended there at the top? I also think there is some kind of unconscious reference to the well-known French guillotine, you know, because that is kind of like a guillotine, you know, in terms of urban image. And so he tortures not just the plants, but also tortures a little bit because there is a sadistic side in him, despite his affectionate side, which does exist and is real. There is a little bit of sadism there. I feel it, the way he conceived this tower. And there is a little bit of sadism, sorry, Mr. Nouvel, on torturing the green to climb your vertical facade, you know, in such a controlled and contrived way. Anyway, sooner or later, of course, nature will win because, you know, its cosmic power is far beyond our abilities. And this is actually a good thing. Anyway, so this is Sydney and this is the project. I like the renderings at night. Of course, they are more mysterious and lyrical, but I'm not sure they look quite like this at night, but these are the renderings, or were the renderings. Now the Serpentine Pavilion in London, which is a good work, I think, is good because it's red. This is its main quality. And in its essence, perhaps architecture is red by definition, because it is something that is man-made and it implies fire conceptually and otherwise. And so it is some kind of a tension and contradiction between nature and man. So his building is in a way honest. It is red. It is a red building. It doesn't want to mimic, you know, something that it is not. In fact, it only amplifies or underlines what is by definition. So I imagine after being inside this pavilion and you go out, you are becoming, you are even more aware of the splendid greenness of nature through contrast. This is an harmony through contrast. The inside is by man, is built by man, and then outside is built, the outside being a park is built by nature or by God, would say Frank Lloyd Wright, who believed in the equation, nature equals God. He was asked, Frank Lloyd Wright, do you believe in God? And he said, yes, but I spell it nature. Now, the Cyprus Tower has plants bursting through its walls. And again, the duality of Nouvel is shown very well. He uses the prism of architecture, and then he allows nature or impulses of nature to break the facades in a so-called disorderly way. You know, his windows are still based on geometry, on squares, 2 different dimensions. But nature is allowed to burst as well. It was described through the building, and you'll see some, some images. So he allows nature to manifest itself, to vent its quest for freedom and for expansion on the facade of a building which is otherwise, rationalistic and Cartesian and prismatic. Now, the MoMA Tower in Manhattan, which I don't think was finished. This part of the presentation was made 1 or 2 years ago, but I checked today and I think it's not finished, and I'm surprised. But at least it's being built. The structure is probably already done. For 10, 15 years, this building didn't start being built. We had problems with, I don't know, all kinds of regulations and signatures and maybe even funds. But now it's being built, and I think it's an excellent tower, Gothic modern skyscraper, and I'm happy he's building it because it will be different from most other skyscrapers in Manhattan and maybe in the world. I'm also sympathetic towards it because I did myself many years ago, almost 20 years ago, a sketch for a possible skyscraper, which is very similar to this one. And believe me, at that time, he didn't yet start this skyscraper. I'll show you my sketch. So this is the structure of the tower, and I like it even at this level, at schematics. I think Jean Nouvel felt instinctively the Gothic character of Manhattan. I remember when I arrived in Manhattan, I told somebody after a few days of being there, I said, this is the medieval city, it's a Gothic city. And he looked at astonishment at me, but I do believe New York has a Gothic, kind of a Gothic quality, although the streets are parallel and there is a Cartesian plan. But the buildings being so tall and so different, and also the streets seem narrow, although they are not narrow, but because the buildings are so tall, they seem to be narrow. So there is a shadow in the city that is obvious. I look at his building, it's so very different from all the other buildings, and it's being built. It's almost done, I think. And I think it's an excellent work by him, and I'm happy he built it. This is my work, that sketch that I told you about. So you see his work. And this was done in 2002 when a young architect introduced me to the mysteries of ArchiCAD. So I began to play with ArchiCAD, and here I designed many skyscrapers. This is the top view of, so-called my skyscraper, which will be forever on paper. Another view of it. And another view. This is not a presentation about me, but I thought, maybe I should show this sketch. Now back to Jean Nouvel and his tower. And these are still renderings, but you can see some images of the tower that is built and is being built. It's almost finished, actually. I don't know why. I'm surprised. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is finished, but I couldn't find today pictures of the finished tower. I don't know why. I'm sure he's very proud of himself that he succeeded in building this building, because he's appreciative towards Manhattan, and I feel he's very proud that he managed to convince the city to build it. And the Museum of Modern Art. Well, these are renderings, but you know, if this is what is going to be, I think is very interesting. And it's interesting because the structure is not any longer the Cartesian one that you see in most other skyscrapers. So I think he did. I think he, because of his intuition, I believe that New York does have, at least in Manhattan, kind of a Gothic quality, and I believe it does. Anyway, but it is also modern, of course, resolutely modern. Now you see, this picture was taken at a time when the skyscraper didn't receive all the go-ahead, and you know, he was melancholy, but it was built. It was built, and even if it's not totally finished, it will be totally finished. Now, the 11th Avenue, 11th Avenue apartment building, it's a good building, and it's across the street from a lesser building, actually, by Frank Gehry, right across the street. I think the one by Nouvel is better, and it's better because it's able to express this, curtain-like facade, which expresses, I feel, that affection he has for multiplicity, and for plurality, and for their fragility, or its fragility. This impressionism of the facade is something that I think it is a quality that he has in his works. And yes, I mean, the amount of work that went into creating this elevation is probably not a little thing, you know, complicated his life, so to speak. But, you know, this is what the architect is supposed to do, to express his beliefs and what he stands for. And that's what he did. And yeah, it's a good building. I have seen it there. I was in a car. I passed by it, but I think it's a good building. Now, the Copenhagen Concert Hall, which is very different, you know, it's almost a cube, a prism. It's blue. It doesn't have any so-called impressionism. But even here there is a but. You know, first of all, the color blue, and then the projections. You know, at night it's chameleonic. It takes different you know, forms of manifesting itself visually. So he does this with theater, as you'll see another work by him where also it's essentially a black box, and then very theatrical, you know, very abstract, very artificial. But then because of the graphic works and the projections, it becomes, you know, something else. You know, like here, you know. It's essentially just a prism with several screens on which there are projections depending on what they want to, what the message they want to, what is the message that they want to send to the city. Now, the Lucerne Culture and Congress Center, this is an older work. Again, you have this cap, you know, this little bit threatening cap, which you'd say it protects you. Yes, it protects you, but it's also a little bit threatening for my taste. Anyway, it's a trademark of his in a way. I think Jean Nouvel has a dark side that he's aware of, but also maybe that dark side is a little bit darker than he thinks. Maybe a little bit, I'm not sure. Anyway, you see, it's very, very domineering, that slab, you know, at the top. You know, it's almost threatening, you know, and it's black. So yeah, I see here also a little bit the guillotine. You know, maybe this is an extreme way to put it, but I'll think more about it. Somebody said, I've heard on the radio that the Rococo, the French Rococo, and they had great artists, you know, Fragonard, Watteau, and this period when the nobility and the aristocracy expressed the joie de vivre through, you know, all the decorations and the fluidities of the Rococo art and architecture. It ended this period not much later under the guillotine of the French Revolution. And yeah, I guess the impressionism of the architectural curtain that he uses has some kind of a premonition or needs the balance, although the word balance is probably a little bit too soft, needs the opposition of the darkness of the guillotine. I'm beginning to talk maybe a little too lyrically. Sorry about this. We move forward. So this is in Switzerland, and then the Dubai Opera, which would have been a great work, I think, but it was not built. I think he didn't win the competition. Great, I think, because he was able to, at least from what I can imagine from the project, create something very surreal. You know, of course, there are some parts which are connected with what we already know about him, like in the lower right corner. But the way the building, you know, becomes almost like a rock that is surrounded by fog and vapors, and it's mysterious. Look at it at night. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on there, but and also it's just a project, it's just a rendering. But you can tell that this is an architect who loves surrealism and sees the other side of things, so to speak. The fairy tale, you know, which architecture perhaps should be aware of. You know, the dream world, you know. Like a Russian poet said, life is a dream, Yevgeny mine. So if life is a dream, how could we build to honor that dream? As long as he plays with the curtain, with vaporous skins or masks, I think he's at his greatest. But when he's unable to hide what is beneath or underneath, then it becomes a little problematic, his architecture. Like here, you see towards outside, we see the Rococo, almost like vapors, architectural vapors of his coverings. But that inside is a, you know, very rigid, you know, structure, and the crystallization of his architecture within the building is kind of in a different spirit. I understand you need both, but how you negotiate between the both, I imagine and I know is not an easy matter. But again, the clients are happy, and the architect is happy, and his wife is happy, his third wife, the young woman on his right. That's why these architects live forever, because they have very young wives. Stephen Hall became for the first time a father at 72, and now at 74 or so, he is for the second time a father, and his wife is probably half a century younger than him. And so, you know, even Kenneth Frampton told me he will be 90 because he has a young wife. And he said he was accusing himself that it's not fair. I don't know if it's not fair. Anyway, it's probably a great pleasure to be Jean Nouvel's wife, and I think Nouvel also is you know, is gaining from this marriage. You know, I'm sure his wife inspires him and makes him lose some weight and be, you know, as creative as possible. Anyway, here they are, him with a Mephistophelian smile on his face. And now I'm afraid, I hesitated, I have to confess. There is a picture of his good friend who is me following, and I took it off because I didn't want to, you know, interfere with you know, with him at all. But then I put it back because I thought, you know, first of all, some people, I mean, considering that there are 200 people here, probably 190 do not know how I look like, because the picture on Zoom is not with me, and I don't even know why I put it there. I keep asking myself, why don't I change it? And I should change it, but I have a hard time to decide. Anyway, this is the speaker now, his good friend, Jean Nouvel's good friend. And here you see Jean Nouvel with Richard Meyer on the right and his wife behind him. And then here you see Jean Nouvel, Lorenzo Piano, and the designer whose name unfortunately I do not know. And here he is, you know, playing Napoleon. Well, the wind just blew his scarf above his head, but he does look, I don't know how Jean Nouvel looked like, not Jean Nouvel, Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte. By the way, you know that famous building at, by that Malaparte, Villa Malaparte. The word Malaparte came from Bonaparte. It just changed, the client of the house changed Bon from Bonaparte to Mal, which is the opposite of Bol. So that's how it became Malaparte. And I showed this before. I don't like to repeat myself. Here are the five Pritzker Prize winners. If you know them by the shoes, it's impossible to know them by the shoes. But I think on the left is Christian de Portson Park, then Wang Shu, then Renzo Piano, then what's his name? I feel like saying Calatrava, but it's not Calatrava. It's the Chilean architect. You know him. But now I have a lapsus. And on the right is Jean Nouvel. You see them here. All proud winners of the Pritzker Prize. And of course, Renzo Piano had to be in the center. Not necessarily. I think he's, I don't think he's an arrogant man. He just built an arrogant Palace of Justice in Paris, but he's not, I don't think he's an arrogant man. What's his name? Why do I feel like saying Calatrava or Alatrava? It's not Alatrava, you know him. Anyway, one new change building in London. I showed this a few weeks ago, and someone who lives in London, Azar, and I hope she's here now. She made an interesting comment about this huge, large department store in London, which is across the street from St. Paul by Sir Christopher Wren. And that opening, that cut, that rift into the building is actually honoring St. Paul. And yeah, Jean Nouvel is able to build even department stores that are not vulgar or frivolous, and I think this is a great quality. He did it also in Berlin with the Galerie Lafayette. And you can tell that he is not indifferent towards what is called the sacred, because you see from the site plan, this is St. Paul, and this is how he cut into his department stores. So there is a clear honoring of the church from his building, especially when you exit, you simply walk towards the dome, towards the cathedral. or towards God, and you will see the plan. So I think it's a very good architectural gesture and decision that he took. And as Azar commented the other time, you know, here is also a cross, a little bit distorted, but a cross, this and this. And, you know, there might be some kind of a dialogue between the cross of the cathedral and the cross of the circulation within the department store or the mall. This is what you see when you exit the building. You see St. Paul. By date, very great amateur architect, Sir Christopher Wren, because he never studied architecture. And I guess he didn't have to. He was a physicist and a polymath. Anyway, and you see the sketch, the initial sketch. Clearly, he was in a dialogue. So he is a contextualist, and this is a good quality that he has. From all the buildings around it, he connected with what mattered, and that is St. Paul. And he connected in a concrete way. So it's a dialogue between the cathedral and the mall. And you could say, well, you know, it's almost like, I mean, you know, you can speculate here. You feel tempted, like fantasizing a little bit. You know, what does he want to say with that break? It's almost as if, you know, the sacred is breaking into the profane. It's creating, but the profane does have its reasons to exist. So the cathedral is advancing through this part, and exactly there, the department store opens up. So we can reflect on the relationship between God and man in terms of this sketch, or starting from this sketch. And here's the architect. Hello, Mr. Nouvel, happy birthday. Happy 75th birthday. Okay, we continue. Tomorrow I'll probably send this recording, although I forgot I'm recording it, and I was not always perhaps very inspired in my commentary, but I thought of sending the recording to his office. Maybe someone will look at it, maybe. Although I don't think it came out as well as I could have made it because of technical irritations, and also, anyway, here is Jean Nouvel young, and I like his smile, you know, I think he was honest when he said, you know, I always work with the seriousness of a child who amuses himself. I think Nietzsche would have loved him too for this, not just Borges. This is not him though, this is Frank Gehry. When I searched for pictures, I also came across this, and I said, let me show you how Frank Gehry looked when he was very young. And very Californian, as you can see, very North American, although he was born in Canada. And this is what Jean Nouvel says: the best engineer a few decades ago was someone who could create the most beautiful beam or structure. Today, it's to do a structure you cannot see or understand how it's done. It disappears, and you can talk only about color, symbols, and light. It's an aesthetic of miracle. Inquisitive, affable, chic and elegant, aware of himself, posing, you know, as the fighter. New police headquarters. This project by him, this building by him, I don't like so much for my taste, but I understand it's for the police. But I think he's a little bit too controlling and too, I mean, it has that part at the bottom that extends a little bit, but essentially it's a domineering building, and I think a little bit unnecessarily. Why does the building of the police have to look like this? I mean, you know, I think he has a problem with authority. paradoxically, he expressed that problem by underlining the power of authority. And I don't think it's a very pleasant underlining. Personally, I wouldn't like to live in a city where the police headquarters looks like this. No, because I would feel threatened, and not because I have, you know, illegal tendencies. I just would feel threatened. I am surprised he didn't, because where is here the lover of fragilities and you know, the multitude and pluralism? It's not. This again, I see the guillotine here. I see the authority. I see the whip, and it's not a pleasant feeling. Anyway, I don't know what he's doing here. I wanted to also show you the shadow. It's almost the shadow of Jean Nouvel. This is a good work. This gallery in Fondation Cartier in Paris. It's very good. I don't know if architecture is only a movie, as somebody wrote, or he said it, I forgot. But the building is good because it's very ambiguous. You know, I have been there, and you don't know, you are inside, you are outside, the tree is beyond the glass wall or is reflected. So it's a play between the inside and the outside, between reality and reflection, and it's skillfully done. I usually reject the aesthetics of glass. He himself said, as I said, you know, quoting from him, total transparency is obscene. He used here total transparency, but the transparency is problematized by reflection. And also it's not an apartment building, it's a cultural center. And there is a lot of nature there, and you don't know sometimes the trees, as I said, are reflected in the glass, by the glass, or you see a glass in the courtyard through the glass. It's interesting. And important exhibitions take place there, and I hope one of you 200 who are attending this presentation will one day arrive to have an exhibition at Fondation Cartier, because they do architectural exhibition. Now, this building I also like, and it's also polemical, because he can be polemical, you know, and it's some kind of an homage to death. You know, what is this heavy cube on water? You know, this rusted heavy cube on water. It's like a premonition of what will follow, the afterlife, the heaviness of death, you know, the prospect of the end of life, floating on water. And so, yeah, it's somehow, I see his dark side, his aware side, his lucid side, because he's a dreamer, but he's also a man who, I think he knows most of the time the limits of life, unless he designs headquarters for the police. It's so very different from Teatro del Mundo of Aldo Rossi. It's almost opposite in its meanings. This is a man who, that's why I mentioned in that essay, illusionism without illusions, illusionisms without illusions. I don't think he had too many illusions, but he's capable of creating illusionisms. Now, Onyx, a building in France, is a small theater, well, not so small, but small compared to other buildings by him. Again, a black box, as he did in Copenhagen, but this is black, it's not blue, with a plan very, very simple and very, very ordered and very, very elegant in a way in its simplicity. And it is here I could use the word object, an architectural object that you know, works artificially for the theater. Now the Torre Akbar in Barcelona, which you probably know, and I have a problem with this tower too, just like the police headquarters in Belgium, this tower also to me is a little bit too phallic, to put it simply. You know, I don't. He tries to bring some relativity to the elevations, to the skin of the building, but I don't think he's able to make it volatile, and the curtain is unable to hide the essence of the building, which is masculinist, too much so, I would say. It's not a circle, but still, the building is, I think, too much an image of power. And the tower itself, a tower is that by definition. Why amplify it? Of course, he's very skillful at the skin, at the level of the skin, and he plays with these colors and these fragmentations. But as a whole, and inside is fine, you know, is fine because you see the light fragmenting the monolithic structure of the building. But from afar and during the day, you still get this, imposing tower that is so unconnected with the city around it. But students in architecture and tourists flock here to take pictures. I think he could have done better. Another skyscraper. This one I like, but was not built. But I like. It's not so sure of itself. That's why I said at the beginning, whenever he was able to unite certitude with incertitude, he was at his best. And here the incertitude is reflected in the perforations of the monolith, but also in the fact that the monolith is not geometrical, is a little bit inclined, is a little bit, is not an arrogant tower. So it has verticality, but it is a Hamletian verticality, if we could call it so. I like it, but it was not built. Now, La Marseillaise, a tower in France, which I think is good, is Cartesian, but he was able to challenge the Cartesian side, the prismatic side of the building with a skin in a more convincing way than in Barcelona. So French architect Jean Nouvel has completed an office skyscraper in Marseille with a concrete facade painted in 27 shades of red, white, and blue in celebration of the port city's landscape. Well, it is also a celebration of the French flag and the fact that it's called Marseillaise. There is some nationalism there, and it's fine. This is the building. 27 shades of red, blue, and white. Well, you know, I don't know how many shades of white you can have. While the blue is meant to represent the city sky, the red is intended to mimic the hue of city's rooftops, and the white is supposed to reference the color of the rock on Massif de Calcanque, a stretch of rugged coastline that runs from Marseille towards the town of Cassis. Well, wait a minute. This is the French flag, let us not forget. There might be some other references, but I think, plus it's called La Marseillaise. I mean, what more French do you want to get? But it's a good work. And I love this image, you know, it's pixelated, it's fragmented, it has sensitivity, it has lyricism, it has impressionism, and it's also rigorous. Towers all over the world look alike. That's what he wrote. They often appear interchangeable. They could exist anywhere, explained Nouvel. They rarely describe their city. They are tall but anonymous. My tower is singular. Its ambition is to belong clearly to the dense Mediterranean sea air. Okay. Now, Barcelona, a park, he designed a park, and of all places in Barcelona, perhaps in some kind of a competition with Gaudi. And you'll see his park, very different from Park Güell by Antoni Gaudi. And here you see Nouvel as he is, but designing with nature in a way. Look at this entrance, you know, this perforated gateway, which also expresses, you know, his constant tensions between nature and man. And also maybe a meditation on the passage of time. Now, maybe the park is difficult to be judged. Maybe in time, you know, it will evolve, the vegetation will grow. This is just a suggestion of park. Park evolves in time. Here he is with the mayor of Barcelona. And here is again the perforated wall of the entrance into the park. Now the Fira Hotel in Barcelona, which has a very interesting window. You know, I don't think there is any other hotel with such a window in the whole world or in this spirit. And it expresses again the tension between the, you know, rectangularity of the work of man and the organicity of nature, but expressed artificially. Interesting window, very courageous to propose such a window and build it. So he's a man who takes risks, no doubt. And that's why he didn't win so many competitions, but that's also why he won so many commissions. And now the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, the United States, is a theater, a famous theater actually. And like in other theaters by him, it's an object, an architectural object that, in essence, a box, and within it takes place the real exhibition or show. The theater show, we see Chekhov on the facade. I mean, the illustration board, the poster, what has, and then on the left Pirandello, but or Bernard Shaw. Here is this great cantilevered, I don't know how to call it. You would say it's an empty architectonic gesture. Well, it's not so empty, because once you arrive here, you can contemplate the frontier between two states and the river, and we'll see a picture of that. So yes, it's almost like in the Russian constructivist work of the early 20th century. It's a courageous cantilevered architectonic part that has also a function. And maybe the function is beyond contemplating the frontier of a state or the frontier between two states. You contemplate also, you know, the vastness of the horizon and the sky and nature, and maybe even meditate on the meaning of life and the meanings of life and the limits of life. So it's a rhetorical architectonic gesture, yes, but it also has a function. And that function is connected with contemplation and thinking and feeling, maybe not in this order. Okay, now we arrive at the last work, the National Museum of Qatar in Doha, which I think is an exceptional work. It still has a little bit of a problem, I think, but it is an exceptional work, and I'm happy he built it, because he allowed here chains to have a chance. These aleatory intersections of various architectonic parts, which seem to be so capricious and so formal and so, you know, in a way empty, is actually not so. Why? Because he found inspiration in this plant. It is actually a plant, is the desert rose, the desert rose that grows in Qatar, and it grows in other countries around Qatar. And he wanted to make a building. Again, he is a contextualist. Here he found inspiration and a chance to contextualize his building in a specific plant for that part of the world, the desert rose. And look at the building. He's obviously a courageous man, and he probably was honest when he said that he plays with the seriousness of a child who loses himself in his amusement. Because you have to be a child in a way to do something like that, like this. The only reservation I have, the only question mark or a percentage of a little bit of unhappiness is that he again uses the circle. Now here there are no circles. You see, this is the work of God. But man, it seems, only rarely is capable to arrive in the vicinity of God, so to speak. There is freedom in this work. There is a change. There is this great aleatory movement of various architectonic parts, assembling themselves at various angles. But unfortunately, most of them, if not all of them, are based on the circle. So there is a certain amount of unhappiness in me that he couldn't go beyond that, just like in the Abu Dhabi building. Maybe he couldn't, I don't know. But all in all is, I think, a very interesting work, and I'm happy he built it. I mean, so very different, no, from the theater in Minneapolis, the Guthrie Theater. So very different, the same architect. And even here, just like in Minneapolis, in Abu Dhabi, he uses this convenient circle, but then he breaks it apart within, but not challenging the periphery, the peripheral line, which is the circle. This is the problem. Otherwise, I think his decision is correct to fragment and problematize what is happening within the circle. The problem is that he doesn't challenge the periphery of the circle, the circumference of the circle. I think that is the problem. Well, Qatar must be very proud of having this building. It's certainly a unique building, and it's supposed to be unique. And again, the connection to that rose, desert rose, offers some legitimacy to his architectural decision to build it in this way. And look at the plan. Brilliant, I mean, you could say this is a banal and mad scribbling, it has nothing to do with architecture. Well, it does. And because it brings the so-called disorder of nature into architecture, and thus he connects architecture with nature. Unfortunately, again, here he's more convincing because you don't see those countless, circles of structure. And if he could have kept those canopies kind of in this spirit, yes, it would have been a little bit more complicated, but I think the work would have been even better. Because the more you see the circles, the more you kind of realize the artificiality of it all, and that it is not really so organically connected with its source of inspiration, meaning the desert rose. But the attempt was there, and I think it's a noble work and a courageous work, and we should salute it. He must be a happy man. By 75, he did a lot, he built a lot all over the world, and I think his success is deserved. And the last image initially was this one, the last image, back to nature. But then because I wanted to have 400 pictures, and this one was the 399th I added with him talking after he maybe I didn't choose correctly, and I apologize. This is the last picture with him, giving a speech, talking after receiving the Pritzker Prize in architecture. Thank you very much. We are a little bit more people now than when we started. Anyway, I will stop.